What's up, everyone? Welcome back to All Things Nerdy with Nate and Joe. I am Nate. That is Joe. Today we have a super fun and a very nerdy topic. On top of that, we're going to be talking about board games, and I feel like board games is one of those topics. Like, if you play them, if you love them, you are just a board game person, right? So we're going to be talking a lot about board games. I myself love board games. I used to host a board game night with a bunch of friends before they all moved away and left me. You know, we had like our bubble during the pandemic and stuff. So massive collection of board games, but I love it. I'm super excited to walk through this and talk about the difference of board games and how they came about and all of that stuff. So that's for me.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, Chris, talk nerdy to us.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me. I'm Chris. I started playing board games, I want to say around 2018. I played a lot of Catan with a lot of friends. And obviously played board games before then, like Monopoly and all that. But I think that, you have like different qualities of board games, right? 2018 started playing Catan, gotten really into the hobby. Started buying some of my own board games. I'm really into King Domino and Clank. And then, pandemic happened, got really into Board Game Arena. And I think, Nate, that's probably a great way to play with your friends online. They're missing on board game night, which is great. So Board Game Arena has been awesome, trying out a lot of new games, especially like really complicated games or really super expensive games that I would never buy on my own that are like $100. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what can you explain? What is Board Game Arena?
Yeah, so Board Game Arena is an online site where you can play board games. They have some popular ones on there, like they have added Wingspan, which is another one of my favorite games. And they also have like some more indie kind of games. And actually, the way that it works is that it programs the rules for you. So you might have also heard of like Tabletop Arena. No, I think that's what it's called.
Tabletop Simulator. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. My computer can't run Tabletop Simulator, so I forget the name of it. But like other places like Tabletop Simulator, all that will just provide you all the resources, and you can just play it. But if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. Board Game Arena enforces the rules, and so you can't take an action that you can't take. And it also kind of helps you learn the games as you go. And so that was one of the things. I really wanted to get into playing Mancala, but I could never understand the games. But they added Mancala to Board Game Arena, and I was like, great, now the AI can teach me. It's awesome.
It's gotta move the rocks.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great site. I would definitely recommend it.
Okay, so you've been playing for a long time, and I definitely agree with you. Like, there are board games like Monopoly, include just like household. Everybody loves them. It is what it is. They're not revolutionary, although Monopoly will ruin friendships, break tables, all kinds of things, right? But like for the most part, there is a section of board games outside of the ones that you get at like Target and Walmart and things you can get at like LGS's local game stores and stuff like that. So you mentioned like Wingspan, Clank, Catan. Catan is one of those, right? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Catan is one of those where, like, socially speaking, like it is competitive, but you also have to work together. So it's like you're almost sometimes working against yourself, or if there's a clear threat, being able to threat assess and stuff like that. Like board games bring so much from a social aspect into it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest thought is like when we were trying to talk about those two differences in games, like Catan kind of points out like the European board game style that came like about. So I was researching the history of board games. My friends and we gave this thing called an intoxicated TED Talk over Zoom, where you had to give a flash talk 5 minutes about something you were super nerdy about, and if you went over 5 minutes, you had to take a shot and keep going. But one of the things I talked about in here is that like in the 80s or the 70s, like Americans got introduced to like the European board games, and like Catan was like one of those. And the biggest difference between those and like Monopoly and Life is that those American style board games, Monopoly and Life, are like very risk favored, like there's not a lot of actual skill. And once you fall behind, there's like no really way to like dig yourself out. But when these Euro style games, like it's a lot more of skill. And like you said, like bargaining, and making alliances and going from there. And I think that that's kind of like led to like the big resurgence. And it's pretty much, it's a lot of the reason why I like board games is because those style of board games are a great like social like cohesiveness. Like it's like, you know, when you play Monopoly, you're kind of just like playing and going around, and you can make small talk about other things. But if you're playing stuff like Wingspan or other, I guess, other games that are more interactive, like, you know, where you're trading and all that, you really got to like hash it out and make friends with people and make alliances. And sometimes, you know, leave the board game session with your wife who's mad at you because you wouldn't trade sheep for her wood.
Yes. Oh my God. So the last time I played
Oh.
Catan, this dude kept, so Steph, my wife, she had a port that she could trade like 2 sheep for whatever, right? And this dude, like all of his squares were nothing but sheep. So he was constantly trading her sheep. I was eventually like, bro, you have to stop trading with her. She is going to kill us all. Please stop. She's like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because I was losing. Why would I not do that?
So
But yeah, go ahead. So okay, Jeff.
I'll say all of the games that you could have stumbled across, like back in 2018, like what drew you to like Settlers of Catan?
I mean, that was honestly, I think that was a lot of people's intros to like kind of board games. And it was really just because I had other friends who had board game nights and invited me. I think, you know, like I played a lot of video games growing up, and I am very bad at Call of Duty and shooters and all that, you know, like my reaction time is super slow. And I think board games, like I got into because it gives you time to like think and do stuff and get into it. And it kind of just, you know, I guess like kind of being nerdy about it. It's like, you know, you kind of obsess over one thing. And once I was able to like stop being obsessed with how, you know, to get noobs to stop killing me, or, you know, like how to deal with spawn campers, I was like, this is great. I can just learn all the birds in Wingspan. And this is like totally what I can nerd into.
The social aspect behind board games is what I absolutely love about them, because a lot of board games are, you know, some of them can be repetitive. Some of them are only as fun as the people you play them with, right? And so the group that you have, or the people that you stumble upon, you know, or the people that you meet playing these matter so much in the game that you're playing sometimes. And one of the things I do love about board games like Catan is it is very easy to learn. There's not a ton to it. But once you learn it, you can like master it, because there is so much you can do outside of the box to put yourself in a better position to win. So it's easy to learn, hard to master. And I think that's why it's a great introduction into board games.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think another thing I really like about board games is like kind of like the lessons that it teach us. You know, like you learn, like, you know, you're talking about like resource management games. So like one of the games I'll play on Board Game Arena, which is one of these ridiculous games that I will never buy. It's called Tizlocken, and it's a resource management game. So and it's a worker placement game. So a worker placement game is usually like when you have little meeples or tokens, and like you put it onto an area, and then every turn that area gives you some kind of like resource, right? And Tizlocken, it's a kind of Mayan inspired. So like you have workers that give you corn, and then the corn gets you like build other things. It's kind of like StarCraft, but like a board game. But with like Tizlocken, like, oh God, it's so ridiculous. The board game, the centerpiece moves every turn, and there's other pieces that are fit like gears onto it, and it moves the other pieces, and your workers are on these gears, and it's moving around, and it's like, I've never won this game in person because it's like 12 different moving parts, and I know I'm going to lose something. But what I like about this game is it teaches you budgeting, right? It teaches you resource management. It teaches you like risk taking and you know, stuff like that. And so like it's something that's kind of useful to you, but it's also kind of fun. And so I guess you're kind of like learning, and you're also learning about other people. You learn who are big risk takers, right? You learn about who are really big like at like politics, and like, you know, get to make alliances. Like it's all ridiculous.
Where do you fall on that, Chris?
Oh, I am a like okay, so I am I will trade you whatever you want until it's like towards the end game, and then I am ruthless, and that's usually when my wife gets mad at me for not trading wood and sheep.
Oh,
For you, Nate, yeah. Nate, you're pretty big. I feel like you're you're good at you know, making the case for what you want.
he's a
I guess is like
politician.
a politician.
Yeah, Nate is a politician and convince anyone to do what he wants them to do.
I still remember the time we were all playing Magic, and Jane was there, and I convinced her to kill Josh so I could win. Josh was like, "This makes no sense. How did you do this?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Yeah,
Uh,
that's actually a really good point. Sorry, talking about history real quick. So one of the things is chess actually used to be a four-player game, and in India, so chess. This is a thing I like about history of board games too, is that like when you make a board game, and I hear there might be something later on your podcast about like board games and all that. But when you make a board game, you're play testing, right? You want to like continuously improve. It's the same thing with like when you play Magic the Gathering. If you're building a deck, you want to continuously improve it and add stuff. But like board games throughout history have all been play tested. And that's the thing with chess. Chess started as a four-player game where you had to make alliances, and then at the end there could only be one person, and if you was a tie, everybody lost. And so like that's like a thing is that we've had from history, like we've had these board games that have just been iterated on for thousands of years until they got to the point where they are now. And I feel like now we still kind of have some of those aspects of those in our recent board games, including the politics.
Yeah, no, I agree with you for sure. I honestly, I didn't know chess was a four-player game. I'm thinking about like chess is a four-player game, and that's a headache.
it's
That's so
hard.
much.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
like, what? I've heard
Yeah,
of
so you can.
Chinese checkers when it's 4 people, but I just never thought of chess. Though that's a lot more than just checkers. So
Yeah,
it's
you
crazy.
can look up pictures of it. Like in India, it was also an asymmetrical game. So asymmetrical games are where not everyone has the same resources, right? Like you might not like so an asymmetrical chess is where not everybody has pawns, right? Or somebody has more queens than other ones. And so in other chess games, the Vikings also had like a version of chess, and there was one person in the middle who had like four queens, and then there was like three people on the sides who had a ton of pawns. And it was very much like a way that like the three pawns want to like team up and take over the person in the middle, but then you want to be one of the last pawns standing, and so you're able to go from that. I think Nate, you probably would have been pretty good at that version of chess.
I definitely want to play Viking chess. That sounds so cool.
Viking chess.
Viking chess. I'm gonna like Google it after
Uh,
this to see if I can find it.
and we got a comment from Fritz. Sounds like some Aaron Yeager vibes, Nate. Like talking about the politician stuff, and like that is so spot on.
Well, as a fan of Attack on Titan, no spoilers, but I'm a little torn on it. I don't know how I feel about it right now, but I appreciate it also.
Oh man. Well, and then Stephanie just said that's interesting. I think it's talking about the difference, like the Viking chess. Like what in this world?
Yeah, I mean,
Vinland Saga now.
yeah. So I mean, like, also another thing I found interesting when I was doing some research is that like so like talking about like American style games like Life and Monopoly, a lot of people find them very boring. I mean, like, how do you guys think? Like, when you somebody brings that out, what do you feel like some of
So
those games?
if we're doing a board game night and someone throws out Monopoly, I throw them out of my house. It's because
Do not pass go directly to jail.
yeah,
Directly to jail.
here's the door for you, right? For me, it takes so most of those games are just very mundane, very boring. There's not a lot to them. There's not a lot of strategy. It is just roll, see if you get lucky, and whoever is the luckiest wins, and things like that. And also, Monopoly can lead to a lot of hurt feelings, and people play differently. Like I'm a big believer that once you don't have the money to pay, you're out of the game. But some people are like, "Oh, trade me your lands, or trade me your hotels, or." Something like, just kind of crazy. So unless everybody's on the same page, I'm out on it. What about you, Joe?
I mean, I like a lot of the standard games just because I have 5 kids, right? And it's a lot easier to explain those. So we have like the Disney Color games. We have Monopoly. We've played that like once, just too much into that. Like even that's kind of like too much for 5 kids and all the moving parts and stuff. But like we'll crush some Mancala and some like just some of the more simple kid related games. Like that's where we kind of thrive right now. But I can see as they get older, kind of because we've played Sailors of Catan a few times, and it's just like only for the oldest, like they were able to kind of get it and run with it. But as far as strategy goes, I mean, a 7-year-old doesn't have a lot of strategy. Like when you think of it, it's more of like just stop showing me your cards. Like keep your cards hidden.
Learn how to bluff. Come on.
Yeah, learn how to
Object
bluff.
permanence. Do you play? Have you
Oh.
played like the game of life or like Snakes and Ladders with your family, with your kids?
Not recently. We played Snakes and Ladders a long time ago, but we just got a comment in that is directed at Nathan. That you're getting attacked out here. I feel like today, Nathan. You
Well, this
haven't
is how
played
I
the-
play. This is how I like to play. Okay, just for the record, I am this person. I want these things because I think it makes it more fun. However, I play with a bunch of people who want to be nice and kind and all those things. They're like, "Well, I don't want you to be out because what are you going to do for the next 6 hours it takes us to finish this game?" Which I understand, but also get out of here with your nonsense. I'm sorry that you couldn't afford your property or to pay your debts, right? But
Yep.
so
Oh, and then Stephanie jumped in. Are there board games for little kids? Of course. Like, you know how many children are here? There's so many board games, but they're all like, you play a couple rounds and you're like, my brain is melting. Like, it's the same thing repeatedly. Just kind of like what you were saying about traditional games. Like, it gets repetitive and stuff like that. Like, that's what little kids game are. It's super repetitive and super like they can understand it. Like, go fish kind of stuff. Like stuff that's centered around those kinds of rules. So that's kind of really where it's at.
Yeah.
Oh,
So one point I wanted to make about like Snakes and Ladders, to talk about games for kids, is so that game was actually a rehashing originally of a game in India, and it was also had Snakes and Ladders. But what it was supposed to be was a game to teach you about karma. And so you would progress along the game, and there would be good choices and bad choices. And if you landed on something that was like a bad choice, then you would take the snake down to the bottom. You have to play all over again, right? Just like how Snakes and Ladders are. And in that game, there were more snakes than there were ladders, right? And that was to teach you that like to become a good person, to get good karma is hard. There's going to be a lot of bad options out there. And so like when Steph asked about like, are there games for kids? Like a lot of games in the past have been for kids, have been educational. And some of these games are less about I don't want to say about the enjoyment, but less about the fun factor and more about teaching. Because eventually that Snakes and Ladders that was in India, and when the printing press came out, and they could actually like print out like board games and stuff. Actually, and then also in the Victorian era, they had a version of Snakes and Ladders, but it was about like virtues, right? And like you would play this game and you would land on a scenario, and then you would play with your kids, and then the scenario would be like a thing in society, like, oh, you come across a person and you step on their toes, like what do you do? And so you open the pamphlet and then you talk about what you do, and there's a little bit of role playing there where you talk about like, oh, what do you do in this scenario, which like points out how like this game still isn't fun. You're like role playing manners,
right.
but it's still a way to teach kids about life, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, I mean, a lot of the games, like think Connect Four, or like Guess Who, like those kinds of games are the kind that we've played. But like getting into more of like something like, hey, maybe we can teach them a lesson from this. Let's see, we got Friston with another question. It's not necessarily a board game, but do you play Here to Slay? Chris, do you play Here to Slay?
I have not played Here to Slay. I need to look that up afterwards.
Same.
So Here to Slay is made by the same people that make Unstable Unicorns and Happy Little Dinosaurs, and we own all of them. I believe we have Here to Slay also. So y'all can't see it now. I'm so sad. I wish we would have started this when I lived in my old house, when I had, the whole back wall of nothing but board games. My wife and I, we probably have 50 plus board games. I know this backdrop is terrible and I need to do stuff with it, but I've been busy. So, but yeah, Here to Slay is super simple, a lot of fun. Killing the dinosaurs, or not the dinosaurs, but the monsters and things are super cool. And Joe, it is something you could definitely teach like a little kid. So it is very user friendly. The art is, is cool, but it's also kind of kiddie, right? It's not overly gory or anything like that. So, but Fritzen, yeah, Here to Slay is fantastic.
That's awesome.
Wanted to jump back over to Monopoly. So Monopoly, I also am not a fan of Monopoly. But originally, Monopoly is actually not a game that like is supposed to be easy to win. So some people know this, but Monopoly was originally called the landlord's game, and it was about like the evils of capitalism, right? And it's the whole point of the game was that like there is the landlord and then there is the non-landlords, and the game always ends with like the landlord winning. And it was created by this this woman in the 1800s who was like trying to make her political case. And what I think is hilarious about all this is that Milton Bradley kind of stole the idea and turned it into Monopoly that we know now, and so made it even more of like the capitalist nightmare, I guess, that the woman who created it was not a fan of. And so we still have these rules with Monopoly, and it still isn't a great game. And I think it's because like it started out as not a great game, and it just made it kind of worse.
Yeah.
They went the wrong way. They're like
Which
play
is,
tested.
Yeah,
Oh,
which is
man.
why I like the jump into European games, right? Because like you kind of get away from that, and like additionally, like I feel like some of the American style games still kind of harken back to the Victorian style era of games where like they were meant to teach you stuff, right? Like you think about Game of Life, you think about Monopoly, right? It kind of teaches you like get a job, like buy a house, all that kind of stuff. But then you play these European games, right? Like you're playing, like I'm playing Clank, and it's like you're an adventurer, like trying to grab treasure before a dragon comes and gets you, right? Or you're King Domino is you're lining up domino pieces as you like draft them from like the board. It's much more kind of like fantasy role playing, kind of like out there, not necessarily like trying to learn the rules of society.
Okay.
I will say, if you go into, say, an LGS, so if you're interested in board games, I suggest going to a local game shop so much more than going to Walmart or going to Target, because going to Walmart, Target, you're going to get Clue, all good games. I'm not hating on them. Clue, Monopoly, things like that. You'll get the card games like Uno and stuff like that. But if you go to an LGS, you have people who's probably played a lot of the games. And I know one here local to us, they actually have games out that you can like test and play and stuff like that. But you would be amazed at the difference of board games and how many different versions of them there are and how many you have to choose from. So there are literally board games for everyone, depending on what your style is, what you like, or what you're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. There's board game rentals are like definitely a thing to check out. I know at least in New Orleans, there's also board game nights at bars. So like people bring board games and go on there, and like meetups there's a thing. And that's actually another thing I really like about board games is and especially like Magic is like if you travel anywhere, and like nowadays whenever I travel anywhere, I bring at least two Magic decks. One is if like I'm traveling with somebody we can play, but two is I'm almost certain that there is a local gaming shop that has Friday Night Magic or something else, and I can just go there and instantly meet people and maybe make a friend and learn more about the city instead of just going out by myself or not being able to like know what's going on in the city.
Yeah, one of our future episodes is actually going to be about Magic. Super excited about it. So, but I agree with you. I think that is a great and easy way to go and meet people. Like I also try to take a couple of decks with me, and my wife and I will always try to go to like game shops and stuff just to see what they have and what their setup is. So anywhere we travel, and we travel a lot, we always try to make a point to go check out their game shops.
Person
So,
came in with another question really quick. How do you feel about Dungeons and Dragons? That might be next level board game since it involves many elements. So we know how Nathan feels for sure. But Chris, tell us how you feel about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so like Dungeons and Dragons are an example of tabletop gaming, right? So there's different types of games. There's board gaming, which is what we've talked about, and then card games. Like Magic is more of a card game, and so is like poker and all that. And then Dungeons and Dragons is an example of tabletop role playing, right? Where you're role playing and you're playing a character. I think Dungeons and Dragons is great for the amount of like the brand awareness that it has, like to get people into. I think my one thing with Dungeons and Dragons is that it is very rule heavy, and I think it's because like that's kind of the goal. So Dungeons and Dragons was started because there used to be this tabletop wargaming where you would like almost like chess but on a real board, or like what's the other one there, were like Risk, right, where like you're moving things but on a board and you're moving characters around and you're trying to fight. And so like in Dungeons and Dragons, when it was created, they play these like war games with castles. And then some people are like, okay, now my guy goes in the dungeon. And they're like, okay, well now we got to like create this whole thing of like people in the dungeon, and they have to create rules, and it's supposed to like have this rules engine for everything you do. What I like is starting out with some other tabletop role-playing games that are less rule heavy, and more about the role playing, because that's what really appeals to me, is that like I want to get into a character. Like a character I always bring to every game is a very low on intelligence, very dumb necromancer who always fails his saves. He tries to like resurrect a fish and like the fish doesn't come out, but the eye pops out and the eye's rolling around like alive, and it's like, it's great. I don't want to win with this guy. I want this guy to fail in the most horrible way, and I want it to be funny. And so that's what I like about like games like that.
Do you play D&D, Chris?
Yeah, Nate, you're the DM. We got a session coming up, don't we?
Yeah. So you weren't supposed to say that. My next question was going to be, tell me how you feel about your DM.
This is another thing I really like about D&D. So like I'm a big fan of comedy. I try to do improv a little bit, and like improv is another thing that's like very hard because you're like trying to make a performance for people and trying to find something that's funny. But like in Dungeons and Dragons, improv is very easy because you're just with your friends, like laughing and doing random stuff. And this is what I really appreciate about games with Nate is that like we will definitely do the thing that is not expected. And so like one of the things is we got into this big fight with this pirate we were not supposed to win. This GM is amazing. I see that, chat.
Josh doesn't want to die next time.
or have you kill his familiar right off the bat.
Let's not talk about
but
that.
Like we weren't supposed to win against this captain, and we how do you set up with the fight on the ship? I think that was like great improv what you did there, Nate. If you want to talk about that real quick.
Oh yeah, so they were in a fight, they were losing, and it was really a situation where they weren't technically supposed to win. It was supposed to be about them working with each other, communicating, figuring out an out of the box solution. And unfortunately, they didn't do it for a while. I thought they were going to die. I was starting to get nervous. But then finally they did like not the one option, but a very viable, good option. And one of the guys who's like very loyal out there, he's like, I will sacrifice myself so y'all can escape. Luckily, that he has the like Porkin, whatever it is, the deity of the sea, saw him sacrifice himself for the good of the group. So from that, there was like a clap of thunder, a massive wave, and threw the captain off the ship, saving them all, right? Like it was just all off the cusp. Like I had no idea what they were going to come up with. I'd envisioned like 10 different ways they could get out of it. But when they pitched this one, I was like, yeah, it's perfect. This works. Let's do it.
Yeah, I love that. The fact that you improv, because we already talked about how it was rainy that night and we were on a ship. And just the fact that like it was like boom, and like it was basically like a Deus Ex Machina, right? Like God comes in to save you. But it was just like a wonderful piece of improv that like you're not going to get that experience on like a board game, or you're not going to get that experience like going in other kind of media enjoyment. So I really like that part about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. So something we try to ask on every one of these episodes, for someone that is new to board games, or for someone that might watch this is like, man, board games sound so cool. How do you recommend them getting into this hobby? And on top of that, what is the one game you would say start with?
Yeah, definitely. So I would definitely get into games that would. So one is how do I find some games? There are a ton of YouTube reviews, and that's definitely what I do. Before I buy any board game, I'll look up YouTube reviews because I really don't want to spend money, doing. And also like teaches me the rules beforehand. And I also will check out board game rentals as well. I think that's really good. Some games I would say to check out if you're kind of a beginner. King Domino is great. I think everybody recommends Catan, but King Domino is great because it goes 2 to 4 player, and then there's an expansion if you want to go even more players. And it's just dominoes, really. You're just matching tiles, and it introduces you to some of the other things like drafting. Drafting is when you get a bunch of options and you get to pick one, and then you pass to the next player. So I think that's really great, and that's on Board Game Arena. Can you guys get your podcast sponsored by Board Game Arena?
I'm gonna send them this after this and be like, hey guys, y'all should sponsor us.
Another one I would say is Sushi Go, and I think actually you might find my favorite type of games involves drafting. And Sushi Go is the same thing where you're trying to make 3 of a kind or 2 of a kind based on different things. Or you're passing around different cards that have different sushi items and go. And that's another game that scales really well from 2 to 6 people. And so I would just try to find really casual games that have like quick play times. A lot of the games will tell you how many minutes it takes to play, and try to find something that's a quick play time, something that scales to different people, so you can bring it out to parties, or you can play with just if it's just you or on your own. And then if you get really into that, get Wingspan. I think Wingspan is great. It's also drafting, but Wingspan also has a single player mode, so you can play by yourself if nobody else wants to play with you.
Yeah. And then if you get past all that and you decide you want to dive deep into it, get Risk, schedule out a whole day because it takes 12 hours, if not longer, to play through a game. Find a couple other people who have nothing else to do for the next 2 days and knock it out. I think for me, so Steph and I, we played, it was a couple weekends ago, we played Azul. I think it was Azul. Anyways, it is a really simple game. The rules are not, like, the rule book isn't like this, right? It's like one page, super easy to read. And I think just starting out, that's what you have to be careful of, is don't overwhelm yourself with the rules. Even if you have to just kind of jump in and start playing, kind of figure it out as you go, don't just sit there and read a book of rules because you're not going to remember most of them. Yeah. So what is your absolute favorite board game right now? You have to pick one.
Yeah, I definitely say Wingspan. Wingspan, it's a really great game because you are competing with. So basically, the idea of Wingspan is it's also a beautiful game. But the idea of Wingspan is you have a set of goals, and there's a bunch of bird cards, and you're trying to create your goals with the bird cards. So you want the most bird cards that have wingspans larger than however many centimeters. Like, they have all the info about the birds on there. And so it's really great is that you're kind of playing the game for yourself. It's not like nobody really can, like, you're not trading resources. So it's really nice because you're kind of trying to do your own thing. But it has a ton of replayability. It has some expansions, so you can add in if you're getting sick of it. And it's a more complicated game. So it's one of my favorite games right now because, like, if I know somebody wants to play it, like, they're really into board games as well, and like they're very into kind of like collecting and going from there. And, like, to be honest, I think that Wingspan is probably one of my favorite board games because I think it's the closest I can get to getting my friends to playing Magic without them playing Magic, like learning how the cards work and drafting all that. It's like, no, it's just birds, man. Like, we're just learning about birds. It's got, like, birds.
It's a simplified version of Magic. It's fun. It's fun.
You think our previous guest Carissa would love this game? I mean, we had her on to talk specifically about birds, right?
Yeah, for sure. She would love Wingspan.
Make her do the bird call every single time she gets one.
Yes.
Yes, that was amazing. Well, Chris, we want to respect your time. We're running up. I got one or two more questions for you. Hey, do you have a story that you have from games that you just absolutely love? Something that sticks out to you, like a moment, like, my buddies did this, we all just cracked up and laughed for however long. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, let me think about that a little bit. Give me the second question, and I'll think about that and get back because I want to make sure it's a good moment too.
Okay.
He wasn't ready with the second one
yet.
yet.
Giving you, like, some random off the top memory, I'll dig deep in the archives while I'm thinking around. Yeah. So yeah, let's go to question 2, and I'll come back with question 1.
Do you have another board game in your sights that you're looking at buying?
Ooh, another board game in my sights I'm looking at buying. Oh, so I want to get more into the legacy games. So legacy is like a style of game that you progress with you play with the same people over periods of time. So Pandemic is like a cooperative game that you have with people. And so, yeah, we played Pandemic with my bubble in 2020, which is very on the nose.
We did the same thing. The Pandemic group pre-pandemic, but it bled into Pandemic. But they did Pandemic Legacy, and it's it builds on each other. Like, if you complete this is your new task, and it's like for January, then for February, and then for March. So you're playing like once a month, and just trying to progress, trying to end the pandemic.
Yeah. So Clank has a legacy version as well too. So that's what I'm looking to getting. Sorry, go ahead.
So this goes. I know we talked about this earlier, but this makes it even more funny because Nathan didn't really give color that he convinced the guy's wife to.
Yeah, this is I tried to get Jane to play. I got Jane to play Magic with us, and she is she was convinced to she was politicked, I guess I would say, into choosing a different target for her sites.
Yeah. So for any of our Magic fans out there, I was playing a Zedru deck. I played non-lives. Non-lives is basically when you take X amount of damage, it leaves the board, you lose the game. But with Zedru, I could give it to someone else. And what that means is if I die, that card leaves the game, right? Which means she loses. So I essentially said, like, we're tied at the hip. If I lose, you lose, which therefore makes it to where she's going to lose the game. She has a chance to kill me, which is going to, in turn, kill her. But then it leaves Josh and Chris to, like, win the game. Instead of doing that, I convince her to kill Josh, which allows me to kill both of them, and then I win the game. And Josh was salty.
Yeah. So going back to your first question, I think so. A game I haven't talked about as much, but I played Werewolf with friends, and so Werewolf is a hidden role game. Like one person's the werewolf, and the other people are the townspeople, and you're trying to find out who the werewolf is. And every night, every turn, right, you're like you vote somebody off the island, and they're off. And so I am not a great a bluffer. That is like one of the things that like kind of gets me about these social deductions, social kind of tricking games. But it was the one time I've won Werewolf as the werewolf was convincing everyone to turn on each other. And I was bringing up old things against each other. It's like, oh, remember when that person didn't do your dishes? And like, how can you trust this person? You're like, oh man, remember we had this party and this guy didn't restock your fridge with beer after he took the last one? Like, how can you trust me? How can you go from there? And it's the only win I've had as the werewolf. And I think I stopped playing the game after that because I was like, this is it. I've reached the top of it.
That sounds like an awesome game. I love Boulder
Sounds
Dash.
like Among Us.
It is kind of like Among Us. Yeah, I love Among Us. We play Among Us. Little, shameless plug here. I have a Discord, so if you're interested in seeing the Discord and jumping in, all means let me know, and I can drop the link for everybody. But we have an Among Us tab on there and play every once in a while. But I love Among Us. It's so much fun. So, but Chris, man, I know we're a little over time. I appreciate you sliding through. You dropped so much knowledge on us. Is there one more fun fact, the weirdest fact you can think of, other than Viking chess, which is still amazing? And like that, do you have one more fun fact you want to share with the people on your way out?
Yeah, so one of the earliest board games was the royal game of Senet, and it was found in ancient Egypt. And so it was actually before they knew it was a board game, the researchers found hieroglyphs explaining something about like passing someone and going to the afterlife, and they thought it was like instructions on like embalming somebody or something like that. Until one of the researchers was talking to like his childhood friend, who was like, oh, this is totally a board game. Like, it's like you're passing the other player and you're moving this thing around. And so they found, you can look it up, the Royal Game of Senet. And they found, and what they think, or what they've shown, is that really it was a board game that taught you how to like achieve to get into the afterlife, like the steps that you should take. And it was also a game because Egyptians were very big about fate and luck, and if you won this game you were thought to be lucky and you had like the luck of the gods on your side. And it was a one-player game as well. It was another thing where it went from 1 to 2-player games, and it just shows why would you play a one-player game like back then, like maybe for fun, but it's also like teaching you values and going from there. So we've had games for thousands of years, and they've been for multiple reasons, but a lot of them is to like learn about our culture and society and how we relate to each other.
That's really awesome, man. Yeah. Well, Chris, I appreciate you, man. Joe, you got anything else?
No, thanks, man. I'm gonna go look up some hieroglyphs and see if I can play an ancient board game now. All right, thanks, man.